The morning Sarah's world shattered started like any other morning in her small Missouri farmhouse. She stood at the kitchen window, watching frost patterns melt on the glass, her hands trembling as she gripped the counter. Behind her, she could hear Thomas moving through the house, his heavy footsteps a countdown to another day of walking on eggshells. 3 years of marriage had taught her exactly how small she could make herself. She had learned to move silently through rooms, to anticipate his moods like reading storm clouds on the horizon, to swallow her words before they could escape and provoke his rage. The vibrant young woman who had once dreamed of adventure and independence had been systematically dismantled, piece by piece, until she barely recognized the hollow-eyed stranger in the mirror. Thomas entered the kitchen, and Sarah's spine went rigid. She didn't turn around. She had learned that looking at him wrong, breathing too loudly, existing too visibly could all be crimes worthy of punishment. His silence was worse than his anger. The quiet meant he was calculating, deciding what infraction she had committed this time, what price she would pay. "The eggs are cold." His voice was flat, emotionless. Sarah's stomach clenched. She had made them exactly 3 minutes ago. They couldn't be cold. But contradicting him was unthinkable. "I'm sorry," she whispered, reaching for the pan. Her hand shook, and the pan clattered against the stove. The sound seemed to explode in the tense silence. Thomas's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with crushing force. The pain was immediate and familiar, but Sarah had learned not to cry out. Tears only made it worse. "Clumsy," he hissed, his face inches from hers. His breath smelled of whiskey, though it was barely past dawn. "Stupid, worthless woman. Can't even make breakfast without causing problems." He shoved her away, and she stumbled against the counter, catching herself before she fell. He ate his breakfast in aggressive silence while Sarah stood frozen by the sink, her wrist already beginning to bruise. The rest of the morning passed in the same suffocating tension. Thomas left for town, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Only then did Sarah allow herself to breathe. She sank into a chair, her entire body shaking with the release of held tension. This was her life now. This small, cruel existence where fear was her constant companion and hope had become a foreign concept. But that afternoon, everything changed. Sarah was hanging laundry when she heard voices from the road. Male voices, speaking in a language she didn't understand. Curious despite her instinct to hide, she peered around the side of the house. 3 native men on horseback had stopped at the fence line. They wore traditional clothing mixed with trade goods, their long hair adorned with feathers and beads. Even from a distance, Sarah could sense their dignity, their bearings so different from the broken-spirited reservation Indians she occasionally saw in town. The tallest rider noticed her. His gaze locked onto hers, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest. His face was striking, with high cheekbones and intense dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her careful mask. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Sarah touched her bruised wrist self-consciously, and she saw his eyes track the movement, saw something like understanding and anger flash across his features. Then Thomas's voice shattered the moment. "Get in the house, Sarah." He had returned early, and his face was mottled with rage. Sarah scrambled to obey, but not before she saw the tall rider's expression harden as he watched Thomas approach. The 3 native men spoke briefly with Thomas, their conversation tense and clipped. Sarah watched through the window, her heart pounding. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw Thomas's aggressive posture, saw the calm dignity with which the 3 men handled his hostility. When they finally rode away, the tall one looked back at the house one last time. His eyes found Sarah's through the window, and she felt that strange connection again, like a lifeline thrown across an impossible distance. That night, as Thomas raged about savages and property lines, Sarah lay in bed and thought about those dark, knowing eyes. For the first time in 3 years, she felt something besides fear and despair. She felt seen. And somehow, impossibly, she felt a tiny spark of hope beginning to glow in the darkness of her broken spirit. 2 weeks after the encounter at the fence line, Sarah's life reached a breaking point. Thomas had been drinking more heavily than usual, his rages becoming more frequent and more violent. The bruises now covered her arms and ribs, carefully hidden beneath long sleeves and high collars. She had become a ghost in her own home, trying desperately to be invisible, knowing it was never enough. The night everything fell apart started with a broken plate. Sarah was washing dishes when it slipped from her trembling fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound brought Thomas charging in from the parlor, his eyes wild with whiskey-fueled rage. What followed was the worst beating she had endured. When he finally passed out drunk on the parlor floor, Sarah lay curled on the kitchen floor, tasting blood, her body screaming with pain. But something was different this time. Instead of the usual numb acceptance, Sarah felt fury beginning to burn through the fear. She thought of the tall native man's eyes, the way he had looked at her with recognition and respect. She thought of the life she had once imagined for herself before Thomas had convinced her she was worthless. And she made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She was going to leave. Moving slowly because of her injuries, Sarah gathered what little she could carry. A change of clothes, the few dollars she had managed to hide from Thomas over the months, a canteen of water, and a blanket. She knew running away from a husband was scandalous, possibly even illegal. She knew she had nowhere to go and no one to help her. But staying meant dying, either quickly in one of Thomas's rages or slowly as her spirit withered completely away. Dawn was still hours away when Sarah slipped out of the house. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to move, had to put distance between herself and the man who had systematically destroyed who she was. She walked through the darkness, following the road until fear of being caught drove her into the woods. The night was cold, and every step sent pain shooting through her battered body. But she pushed forward, driven by desperate determination. By the time the sun rose, she was miles from the farm, deep in unfamiliar territory. Her body was failing. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was fading, leaving only exhaustion and pain. She stumbled over a root and fell hard, crying out as her injured ribs protested. She tried to stand but couldn't. The world was spinning, her vision darkening at the edges. She heard voices and felt terror spike through her. Had Thomas found her already? Would he kill her this time? She tried to crawl away but her body wouldn't cooperate. Strong hands lifted her, and she fought weakly, whimpering in fear. Then a voice spoke, low and calm, in accented English. "Be still. You are safe." Sarah's eyes focused on the face above her, and recognition flooded through her. It was him, the tall rider from the fence line. His dark eyes were filled with concern as he looked down at her. "Please," Sarah whispered, "don't take me back to him." The man's jaw tightened. "We will not take you back." He carried her as if she weighed nothing, moving through the forest with silent ease. Sarah caught glimpses of other men, the same ones who had been with him at the fence. They spoke to each other in their language, their tones urgent but not threatening. Sarah's consciousness was fading in and out. She was aware of being placed on something soft, of a blanket being tucked around her, of the rocking motion of travel. She heard a woman's voice, gentle and soothing. When she next opened her eyes with any clarity, she was in a structure she didn't recognize. The walls were covered with painted hides, and sunlight filtered through the opening above. A woman knelt beside her, elderly and kind-faced, applying something cool to Sarah's forehead. The woman smiled when she saw Sarah was awake and called out softly. Moments later, the tall man entered. In the better light, Sarah could see him more clearly. He was probably in his late 20s, with a commanding presence that had nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with natural authority. His traditional clothing marked him as someone important. He knelt beside her with natural grace. "I am Chaitan," he said quietly. "Chief of my people. You are in our camp, and you are safe here. No one will harm you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I can't go back," she whispered. "He'll kill me." Chaitan's expression hardened. "You will not go back. You are under our protection now." The first week in the Lakota camp passed in a haze of pain and confused gratitude. The elderly woman, whose name was Winona, tended to Sarah's injuries with gentle efficiency. She used herbs and poultices that Sarah didn't recognize, but they eased the pain and helped the bruises fade. Winona spoke no English, but her kindness transcended language. She would sit with Sarah for hours, humming soft songs, stroking her hair with maternal affection that made Sarah's heart ache with longing for comfort she had almost forgotten existed. Chaitan came to check on her progress every day. He would sit at a respectful distance and speak to her in careful English, his voice low and soothing. He told her about his people, about their traditions and their struggles. He explained that they were camped here temporarily, moving with the seasons and the game, trying to maintain their traditional ways despite increasing pressure from white settlers and the government. He never asked about her past, never pressed her to explain the bruises or her desperate flight. His acceptance was absolute and undemanding. As Sarah's body healed, she began to understand the profound difference between Chaitan's world and the one she had escaped. In Thomas's house, she had been property, something to be controlled and punished. Here, despite being an outsider, despite her inability to communicate with most of the camp, she was treated with respect. The women included her in their daily tasks, teaching her with patience and humor. The children were curious but gentle, their laughter a balm to her wounded spirit. Chaitan's presence became the anchor of her days. She found herself watching for him, her heart lifting when she saw his tall figure approaching. He began teaching her words in Lakota, laughing warmly when she mangled the pronunciation. His laugh was a revelation to Sarah. She had forgotten that joy could exist without cruelty lurking behind it. One afternoon, as Sarah sat helping Winona prepare food, Chaitan approached with another man. Through halting translation, she learned this was the camp's healer and spiritual leader. He had come to perform a ceremony for her healing. Sarah watched in fascination as he burned herbs that filled the teepee with fragrant smoke, chanting in a rhythmic voice that seemed to vibrate through her bones. Afterward, Chaitan walked with her along the stream that ran near the camp. The spring afternoon was warm, the water sparkling in the sunlight. Sarah felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, and it took her a moment to recognize it as peace. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "You don't know me. I'm nothing to your people. I'm just trouble." Chaitan stopped walking and turned to face her. His expression was serious, his dark eyes intense. "When I saw you at your house, I saw someone whose spirit was being crushed. I know what it is to watch helpless while something precious is destroyed. My people have suffered this for generations at the hands of men who believe might gives them the right to take and break whatever they want." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched the fading bruise on her wrist. "You are not nothing, Sarah. You are a person who deserves to live without fear. That is everything." The gentleness in his touch, so different from Thomas's brutal grips, made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. "I don't know how to be that person anymore," she whispered. "He took everything from me. I don't know who I am without the fear." Chaitan's hand moved to cup her cheek with heartbreaking tenderness. "Then we will help you remember. You do not have to be broken forever. Spirits can heal, just like bodies. It takes time, but it is possible." Over the following weeks, Sarah began to believe him. The constant knot of anxiety in her chest slowly loosened. She learned to sleep without jerking awake at every sound. She discovered she could laugh without immediately checking to see if she had committed some offense. The women of the camp embraced her fully, teaching her their crafts, sharing their food and their stories. She was learning the language more quickly now, able to have simple conversations. But it was Chaitan who was transforming her most profoundly. He treated her with a respect and consideration she had never experienced from a man. He asked her opinions and listened to her answers. He noticed when she was tired or overwhelmed and adjusted his expectations accordingly. He celebrated her small victories, like the first time she successfully prepared a traditional meal or rode a horse without fear. He never pushed her, never demanded more than she could give, but he also never treated her as fragile or broken. He saw her potential and called it forth with patient encouragement. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Chaitan spoke quietly. "You are becoming yourself again. I can see it in your eyes. The fear is fading." Sarah looked at him, this man who had saved her life and was now saving her soul. "Because of you," she said softly. "Because you showed me what kindness looks like." As spring deepened into early summer, Sarah found herself falling in love with more than just the peaceful life in the Lakota camp. She was falling in love with Chaitan, and the realization terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Every day brought new moments that made her heart race. The way he smiled at her across the cooking fires. The warmth in his eyes when she successfully communicated in Lakota. The careful way he touched her hand when helping her mount a horse, as if she was something precious and valuable. But Sarah carried guilt like a stone in her chest. She was still legally married to Thomas. In the eyes of white society, what she was feeling for Chaitan was wrong, possibly even criminal. She had no idea if Thomas was looking for her, if he had reported her as a runaway wife, if there would be consequences for the people harboring her. The thought of bringing trouble to these people who had shown her nothing but kindness made her sick with worry. One afternoon, she voiced her fears to Winona, struggling through her limited Lakota. The old woman listened patiently, then called for Chaitan. When he arrived, Winona spoke rapidly to him, gesturing to Sarah. Chaitan's expression grew serious as he listened. He knelt before Sarah, taking her hands in his. "Winona says you are troubled about the white man's laws. About the man who hurt you." Sarah nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm still married to him. What I feel for you is wrong by my people's laws. And if he comes looking for me, if he finds me here, he could bring soldiers. I could destroy everything you've built, everything your people have. I should leave before I cause harm." Chaitan's grip on her hands tightened. "Do not speak of leaving. Listen to me, Sarah. Your people's laws that say a man owns his wife like property, that he can beat her and break her and face no consequences, these laws are not sacred. They are wrong. My people do not recognize a bond that brings only suffering. A marriage without respect and love is no marriage at all. He released one of her hands to gently wipe away her tears. Among my people, if a woman is mistreated, she can leave. Her family will support her. No one questions her right to seek safety and happiness. Your white laws may say you belong to him, but our laws say you belong only to yourself. Sarah's heart swelled with emotion. But what about soldiers? What if he brings the law? Chetan's expression darkened. We have faced worse than one angry white man. If he comes, we will deal with it. But Sarah, you must understand something. The way I feel about you is not small or casual. In my heart, you are already mine, if you will have me. I want you as my wife, not because I wish to own you as he did, but because I wish to walk beside you as an equal. Because you make my spirit sing. Because I see in you a strength and beauty that takes my breath away. The declaration hung in the air between them. Sarah felt as if her heart might burst. I love you, she whispered. I didn't think I could ever feel this way, could ever trust a man again. But you've shown me what love should be. You've given me back my life, my spirit, myself. Chetan pulled her into his arms, holding her with a combination of strength and gentleness that made her feel both protected and free. Then be my wife by our customs. Let me court you properly, let me show our people that my intentions are honorable. When you are ready, we will have a ceremony, and you will be mine in the eyes of my people. The white man's laws do not reach here. They do not define what we are to each other. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Sarah could have imagined. Chetan brought her gifts, small tokens of his affection, a beautifully beaded bracelet, wildflowers gathered from the meadow, a soft deer hide he had prepared himself. He courted her publicly, his intentions clear to the entire camp. The people watched with approval and obvious joy. Several of the women pulled Sarah aside to tell her, through translation and gestures, how rare and precious it was that their chief had opened his heart this way. Chetan took her riding across the vast prairie, showing her the land he loved. He taught her to track animals, to read the weather in the clouds, to find north by the stars. He shared his dreams for his people's future, his fears about the encroaching white settlement, his determination to protect their way of life for as long as possible. And he asked about her dreams, listening intently as she described the life she had once imagined before Thomas had crushed her spirit. He helped her reclaim those dreams, helping her see that they were still possible. Their first kiss happened on a warm evening as they walked back from the stream. The sun was setting, painting the world in gold and amber. Chetan stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes asking permission. Sarah answered by rising on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was gentle and sweet, nothing like Thomas's aggressive, claiming kisses. It was a conversation, a promise, a beginning. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Chetan rested his forehead against hers. You have healed my heart, he whispered. I did not know I was wounded until you showed me what wholeness feels like. The ceremony took place on a perfect summer morning when the prairie grass was high and golden. Sarah wore a beautiful dress that the women of the camp had made for her, white buckskin decorated with intricate beadwork in blues and yellows. Her hair, which had grown long during her months with the Lakota, was braided with leather and feathers. She felt like a different person from the broken woman who had stumbled into these woods months ago. She felt reborn. Chetan stood waiting for her, magnificent in his ceremonial clothing. His chest swelled with pride and love as he watched her approach. The ceremony was conducted by the elder holy man, words in Lakota that Sarah now understood flowing over them like a blessing. They exchanged vows, not of ownership or obedience, but of partnership and respect. They pledged to walk side by side, to honor each other's spirits, to build a life of mutual support and love. When the holy man declared them bound, the camp erupted in celebration. But their joy was short-lived. 3 days after the ceremony, a rider galloped into camp with urgent news. A group of white men was approaching, led by someone demanding to speak with the chief about a missing woman. Thomas had found her. Sarah's blood ran cold, all the old fear rushing back. Chetan's face hardened with determination. Stay here, he commanded, his voice brooking no argument. Let me handle this. But Sarah shook her head. No. I've spent too long letting fear control me. I need to face him. But not alone. Please, stand with me. Chetan studied her face, then nodded slowly. Always. I will always stand with you. They walked together to the edge of the camp where Thomas waited with 2 other men, probably hired guns or friends enlisted to help retrieve his escaped property. Sarah barely recognized the man she had once called husband. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Or perhaps she had simply grown beyond his ability to intimidate her. Sarah. Thomas's voice was sharp with anger and false concern. Thank God. These savages kidnapped you. Come here now, and we'll take you home where you belong. Sarah felt Chaitan tense beside her, but she placed a calming hand on his arm. This was her moment. She stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. No one kidnapped me, Thomas. I ran away because you were killing me, piece by piece. I will never go back to you. I would rather die free than live as your prisoner. Thomas's face purpled with rage. You're my wife. You belong to me. The law says so. Chaitan moved to stand beside Sarah, his presence a wall of protection and strength. Your white man's laws have no power here. Sarah is under my protection. She is my wife now by the laws of my people. She has chosen her path, and you will respect it. Thomas laughed, an ugly, mocking sound. Your wife? A savage squaw? You're nothing but a whore now, Sarah. You've thrown away everything decent for this animal. The slur made Chaitan's warriors shift angrily, hands moving to weapons. But Chaitan remained still, his voice cold and hard as stone. You will leave now. If you return, if you send others, you will face consequences you cannot imagine. Sarah is no longer your concern. Go back to your empty house and leave us in peace. Thomas's companions were looking nervous, scanning the camp full of warriors, calculating odds they clearly didn't like. Come on, Tom, one muttered. She's not worth dying over. Let her go. But Thomas made one last desperate lunge toward Sarah. He didn't even get close. Chaitan moved with fluid grace, intercepting Thomas and throwing him to the ground with effortless strength. Chaitan's knee pressed into Thomas's chest, and when he spoke, his voice was a deadly promise. If you touch her, if you even look at her wrong, I will end you. She is mine to protect, mine to love, and I will defend her with my last breath. Do you understand? Thomas, faced with real strength for the first time in his life, crumbled. He nodded frantically, and Chaitan released him with obvious disgust. The three white men retreated, Thomas glancing back once with impotent rage written on his face. Sarah watched them go, feeling the last chains of her old life fall away. When they were gone, she turned into Chaitan's arms and wept, not from fear or sorrow, but from overwhelming relief and joy. She was free. Truly free. The months that followed were the happiest of Sarah's life. She threw herself into learning everything about Lakota culture, becoming fully integrated into the community. She learned to prepare hides, to make pemmican, to identify medicinal plants. She became fluent in the language, her accent bringing smiles to her friends' faces. She participated in ceremonies, learned the stories and songs, and found a spiritual peace she had never known in her white Christian upbringing. Her relationship with Chaitan deepened into something profound and unshakable. They were true partners, consulting each other on decisions, supporting each other through challenges. Chaitan valued her perspective, often asking her input on matters of camp management and even diplomatic relations. Sarah brought fresh ideas from her white upbringing, combined with her newfound Lakota wisdom. She became a bridge between cultures, though she now firmly considered herself Lakota in spirit. When Sarah discovered she was pregnant, the camp celebrated as if every person there was the child's parent. Winona fussed over her constantly, making sure she was comfortable and well-fed. Chaitan was tender and attentive, his joy at impending fatherhood evident in every gesture. He would sit with his hand on her growing belly, speaking to the baby in Lakota, telling stories of their people and promises of love and protection. The baby arrived on a cold winter night, a healthy boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Koana, meaning swift, because he had entered the world quickly and with fierce energy. As Sarah held her son, with Chaitan's arms around them both, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had been broken, but she had been remade stronger. She had lost everything and gained a world. Her spirit, which Thomas had tried so hard to destroy, had not only survived but flourished beyond anything she could have imagined. She was Sarah no longer, not really. She was Wakanda Wikapi, Sacred Star, a name the holy man had given her during her adoption ceremony into the tribe. She was a Lakota woman, a chief's wife, a mother. She was loved and respected and valued. She was, finally and completely, free. The past was a shadow that no longer had power over her. The future stretched ahead, uncertain as the prairie wind, but bright with possibility. And whatever came, she knew she would face it with strength, courage, and love. Her spirit had been destroyed, but a Lakota chief had helped her build it anew, stronger and more beautiful than before.